You have an intimate relationship. You've had it for 10 years. You trust your partner. So what does that mean? You know where you are. You know who you are. And you have a pretty good idea of where you're going. And then one day you'll find out that your partner has been cheating on you, not with one person, but with 3 people. And for the whole 10 years. Well, hypothetically, that comes as a shock. Although you may have ignored many intimations that such might be the case. Irrelevant. Let's say it comes as a shock. Well, what happens to you? Well, you don't know where you are. You don't know where you've been. That's interesting, eh? Because you think you know where you've been because you've already been there. But all of a sudden something can happen so that you are so flipped over that you don't even know where you were. So that means in some sense the past is dependent on the present. A very peculiar thing. You also have no idea where you're going. In terms of not knowing where you are, that's deep, eh? Because you might think, well, I thought it was in a marriage. That turns out to be wrong. I thought I knew who my wife or husband was. That turns out to be wrong. I concluded on the basis that I knew my wife, that I knew something about women. That turned out to be wrong. I thought I was in a relationship with someone I could trust. That is wrong. I don't know enough about trust. I'm obviously too gullible. And so what that does is throw virtually everything that's ever happened to me in severe doubt, right? That's the emergence of chaos. And that's this. Sometimes you're going from point A to point B, and something you don't expect manifests itself in the middle of your plan, but it's not such a catastrophe because you can just work around it. And then sometimes something pops up and you just do not have a plan anymore. And so then you might ask yourself, just exactly where are you when you don't know where you are? And I would say, that's a place. And it's actually a place that's well documented in classic religious and mythological stories. That's chaos. The Taoists, for example, they believe that the world is made out of chaos and order. Well, order, that's where you are when what you do gets you what you want. Chaos, that's where you are when you have no idea what's going on. And you might ask, well, is there a way that you should act when you're in chaos? And the answer to that is, there better be, because it's a place you're going to visit several times during your life. And everyone visits that. And so let's say they got post-traumatic stress disorder because a relationship collapsed on them suddenly, which is quite common. You know, they get betrayed or someone leaves them suddenly, and then they don't know what to do, because, especially if they're conscientious, because then they just tear themselves into pieces trying to figure out what they did wrong to bring about that event. And the reason they're doing that is because they want to retool their perceptions and their actions so that the probability that they'll have the same experience again is minimized. And their mind won't leave them alone till they do it. And no wonder, right? Because if you fall into a big pit and you get really hurt, the first thing you should figure out is how to not fall into big pits anymore. And your mind is set up exactly for that. And so what you do with someone who's having problems like that, so maybe they're waking up at the middle of the night obsessing about what went wrong, is you walk them through it. You do a situational analysis first, because one of the oversimplifications that people make, and this is especially true for conscientious people, is if something bad happened to me, I must have done something to deserve it. Now, that's actually a pretty functional idea, because it suggests that there are things about your behavior that you could change that would make the future better. But the problem is that, say if it's the collapse of a relationship and you've been with that person for 8 years or longer, well, you did so many things with them that the idea that you did something wrong pretty much extends to every single thing you ever did with them. And that's, how are you going to fix that? And so that's part of the trauma, actually. The trauma is 80 million snakes all at the same time. It's like, well, forget it. You don't have time to go through all that material. And so partly what you do is with people, and this is what you should do with yourself too, is you do a situational analysis. It's like, don't be assuming necessarily that the thing that happened to you only happened to you because of what you did or didn't do. There's all sorts of factors at play.
That women choose a safe man that is willing to be monogamous with them, and perhaps maybe they're above him in a social class or in sexually, and then they'll cheat with
Yeah.
someone who is
Yeah,
above
well,
them.
it's common, but it's not the norm, right? It's still
Right.
the norm not to do that. The norm
Right.
is fidelity,
Right.
but there's plenty of exceptions.
And this is enforced monogamy, culturally,
Yes.
the norm. This is
Yes,
the
well,
very
enforced
definition of it.
monogamy is this. It's like, okay, so my son's getting married in September. And so let's say he comes to me in a year and he says, hey, Dad, guess what? I've had 3 affairs in the last year and they've all been successful. I haven't got caught. Aren't I a good guy? What am I going to say to that? No. What the hell are you doing? That's not what you're supposed to be doing. That's enforced monogamy.
Enforced monogamy meaning the people around you try to guide them in a way that you think is going to lead to
it's
harmonious family
Yes,
life.
it's built deep into the cultural norms, and if that starts to destabilize, then there's trouble. And that doesn't mean that it's not prone to all the problems that you laid out. Look, there isn't a bigger problem than successful reproduction. It is the big problem. And all of the solutions that we've generated for it are full of flaws. Like, here's an example. The gender pay gap. Okay, there's no gender pay gap. There's a mother gap. There's other reasons too, but women really take a hit when they become mothers. Okay, that's unfair. Fair enough, man. What the hell are you going to do